So this is much simpler than the previous one. It's just a noise generator and a sample and hold, but then it allows you to configure those into some slightly more useful ways of utilising the sample and hold. So at the moment it's just clocking off this clock over here, and the sample and hold section is sampling the internal noise, and we're passing that to the CV of this oscillator so we can hear it. So the sample and hold has two sections to it. One is a clock generator, which can be used as a VCO as well, and then the second is a slew rate and filter to round off the edges of the sampled waveform. So at the moment the filter's wound right up, and if we bring the filter start smoothing that out, or leave it as a sharp, steppy type waveform. As we bring up the speed of the oscillator there, we'll just try and get it so it's tuned. So it's pretty much smoothly stepping from one to the next. And as we adjust the frequency of the steps, the slew time tracks that as we move along, just for some simple adjustments there. Right down to slow rates. So along with sampling the internal noise, you can select between the internal noise and external input, or running it as a straight oscillator itself. And when it's running in the audio rates, if we just listen directly to the output now, we can start sampling up at audio pitches. So there's the filter, fairly obvious. But because the filter tracks the rate at which we're sampling the noise, as we bring that down, it's better in the headphones obviously, or with the bigger speaker, it maintains a constant energy in the noise even though we're effectively reducing the filter rate down to earthquake stuff. And with a big subwoofer going, you get the full impersonation of an earthquake down at these very slow noise rates. And then that'll slow further down into the typical CV rates like we were using on the oscillator earlier. So that's the constant noise, which was first brought in on the DDS drum modules. That uses a special filter that does a similar thing. And so here we now have a Euro rack for convenient shaped noise sources rather than a fixed set of noise shapes. It's now on a nice continuous control, and of course it's all continuously controlled by CVs if that's your sort of thing. Flipped it over to the internal oscillator. If we stop clocking that, we've just got a simple oscillator that's flipping between the slew limiter or the filter, and with that at full frequency we just get a square wave, and then using the slew limiter or the filter, that can be brought back down to a sine wave or a triangle wave, and then that'll track the frequency control. So once you've got a sine wave, it tracks over the range, and that can follow CV inputs. So that's a 1 volt per octave input when it's running as an oscillator. So doubles as something more useful than a sample and hold when you don't need a sample and hold. And that'll go, as usual, from audio rates way down into these slow LFOs. The LFO rates can then be synchronised using the clock input. The interesting addition to this noise source is it has an adjustable distribution. That's most interesting when you're driving non-deterministic sequences or producing pitches. You can change the distribution at one end from a rectangular distribution through triangle up to a normal distribution, which changes the probability of a high or a low note occurring from very likely, and it becomes less and less and less likely, and the CVs are all centred more around zero as the distribution comes in tighter and tighter. So that'd be the most unusual thing about this noise module. Down the bottom, as well as doing a sample and hold, it can do a track and hold, where it keeps the switch closed during the high period, so you can get gating type effects with audio. So just straight gating.
So what does that switch do? The switch that you're holding?
This is the zoom switch.
Right.
It interacts with the knobs to control their coarse or fine adjustment. So rather than having coarse fine controls for both the CV inputs and the offsets, that allows you to adjust those down to very small fractions. They're also linked to some of the functions on the buttons. When pressing this button, it switches between the slew and the filter, and selecting one of the zoom positions selects whether it's sampling the noise, the external input, or the internal LFO. And on the bottom, switching between sample and track modes, and also enabling MIDI tracking of the oscillator if you want to play it as a pitched source. So it's just designed to be a compact and generic module that could be used for lots of different things. With combinations of different resets and LFO rates, you can actually do clock division, multiplication, and things like that as well. There's a few alternative uses for any module.
So is there one more module?
There's one more, which is just a mixer and an attack release envelope generator.
So maybe we'll look at that next week?
Maybe next time I'll put out some other videos of it separately.
Alright, cool.
And that's just a simple mixer that has ring modulators and VCAs built into it.
Oh.
So you've got some modulation sources there, and they can be linked to the internal VCA, but the VCA also has, the internal envelope generator, but the internal envelope generator also has its own output, so you can use it for other things. And that's a combination attack release or attack decay generator, and it has a delay period from when it's been triggered to when the attack occurs, and that delay can be stretched way up to several seconds, so you can create sort of ping-pong effects. Or the classic uses in subtractive synthesizers was you'd play a note and then the vibrato would come in after a delay, it'd slowly fade in. Those are the sorts of things. It's good fun for doing FM patches because it's internally routed to the mixer. You can have the attack release generator slowly fade in some modulation from a ring modulator or an FM to an oscillator. Do some demos of that one another time.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this one?
Just got a question. Much earlier, before you released all of them, you said that you were thinking of doing a master patch preset manager.
That was a possibility and would have required lots of manufacturers to get on board.
Yeah.
I've been pushing that with many of the module manufacturers around the world, and it needs sort of 3 or 4 of us to do it together, and as yet no one's really interested. So
Cool.
it'd be lovely if we could end up with multiple modules from multiple manufacturers where if you patch them together it could remember the patch settings and remember the whole.
I was just because like you've got so many now, it would actually be quite useful.
Yeah, that would have required it engineered in from the start and would have added some extra expense to it. But that also has some possibilities to then go polyphonic as well. So there's some good reasons to do that. The main reason to not do it is doing it on your own when it's designed to be an interoperable system sort of locks people into just that. And adding that expense to every single module would have made them unattractive for people who weren't utilising it.
Yeah.
So that's probably something to dream of maybe in 10 years' time when the module manufacturers can all agree on a common standard for polyphonic patch-savable modular synthesizers.